All right, thanks everyone for calling in. We are going to go ahead and get started now. So today's webinar is about the U.S. Department of Energy's Marine Energy Collegiate Competition. My name is Ariel Cardinal. I'm with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, and I'm going to be the competition's operations manager. On today's webinar, we also have Allison Johnson from the Water Power Technologies Office at the Department of Energy. Elise DeGeorge, also here at NREL, she'll be the head rules official, and Nathan Tom from NREL, who is going to be a core competition staff member. Just wanted to let everybody know on the call that this webinar is being recorded. All right. So welcome to the webinar. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about the Department of Energy's Water Power Technology Office, give a brief overview, then dive into what the Powering the Blue Economy is and how the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition is going to tie into that effort. We're going to overview the event and the deliverables required for the competition, go over some feedback from similar collegiate competitions that have been held by the Department of Energy, talk a little bit about where the event is taking place at ICOE 2020, and then go over expectations and timeline and review and criteria for all of your deliverables that are required. Any questions that you have throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them into the chat box in the control bar. We will answer them at the end of the webinar during the question and answer period. And again, just notification that this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be posted on the Collegiate Wing, the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition's website, and the link is provided on the bottom of this slide, along with other documents that are relevant to the competition. They will all be posted there as well. So a little bit about the U.S. Department of Energy's Water Power Technologies Office. The DOE WPTO was formed in 2008. The program supports all stages of research for both marine energy and hydropower. Within the last year or so, WPTO has begun funding efforts to analyze the current workforce and has funded NREL to identify mechanisms to strengthen the workforce through educational materials, industry academic collaborations. And then in 2018, also, the WPTO began exploring opportunities for water power in alternative markets, which we'll get into a little bit on the next upcoming slides. Sorry about that. So what is the blue economy? So the blue economy is, by the World Bank, defined as the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, and improve livelihoods and jobs while preserving the health of ocean ecosystems. It's estimated that the blue economy economic value could grow to $3 trillion by 2030. It is an administration priority, and we think it could become an economic force in this century. The Water Power Technologies Office published the Powering the Blue Economy report this last year, which explored different viable markets in which marine energy can contribute to the blue economy, which we'll get into in the following slides. But basically, they've identified that marine energy can have a dual role in the blue economy. Energy generation at sea is a standalone sector, but also removing energy constraints can enable development of other sectors. These graphics show the different markets that the Powering the Blue Economy report analyzed as possibilities for marine energy to have an impact on the blue economy. And it's broken up into two major applications, the power at sea markets and the resilient coastal communities markets. And you can see some of these potential applications within each of the markets. So the ocean observations, underwater vehicle charging, marine algae, marine aquaculture, seawater mining are all considered under the power at sea application. And then the desal, isolated communities, and disaster recovery and resiliencies all fall into the resilient coastal communities bucket. And then the chart on the left here of this slide shows kind of where in the ocean each of these activities would take place. And this graphic just also shows the different applications for marine energy within the Powering the Blue Economy sector. So kind of showing you some possible ideas for devices, marine energy devices, and how they can power each of these applications. By no means a comprehensive graphic of all the different possibilities, but just showing some initial ideas on how marine energy can benefit. And so now I'm going to turn the discussion over to Allison Johnson from the Water Power Technologies Office. And Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just say a couple quick things about really, before we get into discussing the details of the competition, I'll just cover kind of why DOE is so interested in these blue economy opportunities and why we think students and university students participating in a competition like this is really a great way to add to the research field. So if we do have anyone on the phone that is not familiar with marine energy technology, I do usually have just two things that I like for people to know about. And one is that marine energy really is such a large potential resource. If you've ever been to a beach, like you can just imagine how much natural kinetic energy exists in waves and tides. And, just knowing that that is a huge resource that could be tapped to add to our country's, energy generation mix, that's a huge opportunity. But secondly, and this might be quite obvious, but given that marine energy, the resource it's marine energy, it's out at sea, that means that we can provide power to ocean-based industries and activities like those represented in these blue economy sectors that really, these are sectors that without something like marine energy, they typically have difficulty accessing power, or their access to power at least comes at a very, very high cost. So that means that, marine energy is uniquely situated to provide power to these coastal and island communities that you just heard about and a lot of these ocean-based economies. But there's a lot more research that needs to go into this potential. So we did at DOE produce this Powering the Blue Economy report where we did some kind of preliminary assessment of these blue economy opportunities for marine energy. But there's so much more that needs to be done to really look at individual markets and really quantify the potential for not only, potential technology development, but also to really look at the needs of those markets and evaluate kind of what is needed for marine energies to fulfill those needs. So not just, to make a device perform well, but how does it actually fit into the requirements of specific industries? So, I'll turn it over to my colleagues at NREL to explain a little bit more how we're looking at tapping as students through this competition. But really, we're looking for, a collaborative, interdisciplinary group of students to come help us with this challenge and really think about the market and economic potential, but also the technology needs to really deliver power to those markets. So thanks, and I'll turn it back over to my colleagues at NREL.
Great, thanks, Allison. As Allison mentioned, we're really interested in getting a group of interdisciplinary students together to start thinking about how marine energy can really have an impact on the blue economy. One of the driving factors behind this is that if marine energy is going to be successfully integrated into the blue economy, various skills will be required. This slide shows, just pictures of some of the different possible skill sets that are going to be needed, and we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, where you can see that not only will there be a need for expertise within each phase of project development, there will be a need for strong collaboration amongst the various entities to ensure project success. So anything from a lot of the skilled trades in the shipping industry to your traditional engineers, to site and plant managers will all need to work together to get this new industry going. And that's where this competition comes into play. So about the MECC, which is the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition. So noting that there's a need for viable concepts, the workforce, and interdisciplinary coordination, we're launching the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition. Some ways we see this to be a mutual benefit for the WPTO industry and you are identified on this slide. The competition will get teams to work across different disciplines, providing students with an understanding of what it takes to get a project going. It's a hands-on experience that we think will be really valuable when it comes to looking for a job, and also just providing you with a perspective of what it takes to get a business idea from the initial concept to the market. And what we've heard from a lot of students interviewed in the past year is that there's a desire for more industry interaction, and this competition will sort of force that interaction both at the ICOE 2020 conference, where the students will have a chance to make a public pitch, and throughout the development of the business plan. Another thing that we're highlighting on this slide is that there is an opportunity outside of the rules of the competition to partner with K through 12 programs to take what you're learning and invest it in the education of others, either in your community or anywhere really. So yeah, I just want to iterate that this is the first Marine Energy Collegiate Competition, so that you have a chance to be at the ground level for this initial competition. So the components for the 2020 competition, the main idea is to create a business plan and also a conceptual level technical design of a marketable device that powers any sector of the blue economy. The competition components is that the teams will be required to submit a written report, which is going to be consisting of a business plan and a preliminary technical design, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on. Then the students will have to perform a public pitch during the ICOE 2020 conference, and that is of their business plan. They will also make a poster and a non-working tabletop scale model of their concept, which will be on display at the conference as well. Also, recommended opportunities, as I mentioned before, there's going to be your own optional opportunities to engage with your local community and share your knowledge and education. And then also at the conference itself, there will be industry engagement opportunities. So going into the details of what the business plan is going to look like, it's a maximum of 25 pages. With the following sections that need to be detailed: a concept overview, an analysis of the global market opportunity, details on who the relevant stakeholders are, and this portion includes the requirement for end user surveys. So that's where some industry engagement comes into play. And then a look at the development and operations, financial and benefits analysis. Note, we're not requiring a full pro forma for this, but details on, financials and benefits analysis, which we have more information on the rules and requirements document on exactly what we're looking for in all these areas, but you can find that there. And then a preliminary technical analysis, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And again, I just wanted to reiterate that all of this information is detailed in the rules and requirement document, which is on our website at the address that's shown on this screen. And I'm going to hand the speaking over to Nathan Tom to talk about the preliminary technical design component of the competition.
Thanks, Ariel. And thanks everyone for joining the call again. So from the preliminary technical design, we want to make sure that enough thought has been put in to make sure that you have a concept that could be viable and that some entrepreneur or someone might be interested in, and having a full understanding of what service you're providing, all the way down to how this might be conceptually designed or built from an engineering firm. So we want to make sure that at least you have a measure of what type of loads, and when we say load, we're talking about what type of power, what power source you are trying to meet. So if this is aquaculture, how much power does it need to generate air or have lights on? If it's desalinization, what type of, how much water fresh water you are producing per day and how much power that is going to require. That could be average over the year, or you could go a little bit more in depth and seeing how that might change seasonally, given that the wave and tidal resources will also change with the seasons. We also would like to have a first order performance analysis. So depending if you are picking a wave energy converter, tidal energy converter, OTEC, or whatever power system you're using, to make sure that you have good estimates for how much power it can produce in most likely the deployment location that you pick. If you're off of the Alaska coast, if you're in Southern California, we want to make sure that whatever device you are modeling can actually produce the power that you claim in your report. And when we say first order performance, you can try and use some of the open source codes that are available, such as Wexim or FAST, to do a little bit more in-depth model. Or if your team would prefer to do a literature analysis and try to find out what are common or presented efficiencies for these devices through third-party manufacturers, that could also be satisfactory. And we also want to make sure that the design that you have is able to withstand the loads, environmental loads. So in this case, we're talking about the forces from waves, from tidals or currents. So you're not able to put in a design that would work very well efficiently wise, but might break and require additional operation and maintenance costs. And in the end, we would like to see some basic engineering diagrams, such as using AutoCAD, SolidWorks, to help present and visualize your idea for the judges to evaluate.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. All right, and so then we went over the different components of the competition. This is our proposed scoring rubric, which is also detailed in the rules and requirement manual. The business plan and preliminary technical design in that rules and requirements manual are broken down into many more aspects that are going to be weighted, but this is just an overall showing of where you would, where the main points are going to. So the business plan is going to be weighted a little bit higher than the preliminary technical design. And again, the written report is going to be a little bit more of a weight than the public pitch. But if you look at the public pitch and the poster and model combined, they do add up to being a significant portion of what your product is going to be scored at. So these are, you have a possible 275 points in the business plan and 225 in the preliminary technical design. And so now I'm going to pass the mic over to Elise DeGeorge, who's going to talk about the collegiate wind competition that she has been working on for the last six years.
Yeah, we've been. Hi, this is Elise, and I'm working on this water power STEM project, which includes the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition. But I'm also the PI on the Collegiate Wind Competition that has been that we've been performing since 2014, and we've learned a lot over the years. We have other slides here that include some lessons learned, which we'll get to a little later. But what we found is that the Collegiate Wind Competition really is a tremendous opportunity for students and PIs. The PIs at the universities that participate, some have had strong wind energy education programs, and others have really had nothing, and they've served to support one another in developing robust programs to achieve our end goal of the Collegiate Wind Competition, which is to get more students excited about wind energy or renewable energy overall, and to go into the renewable energy workforce. And it's helped them to get jobs in the industry. The industry puts a lot of weight into the hands-on experience that we offer, and we're learning the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition is able to leverage a lot of lessons learned and opportunities that we've learned over the 7 years that we've held the Collegiate Wind Competition. Yeah, and we wanted to show you a testimonial from the last Collegiate Wind Competition in 2018. This was held concurrent with AWEA Wind Power, which is the largest wind energy industry conference in the U.S. We hold it every other year alongside that main event, which is allows for the exposure to industry and more exposure for the students with the opportunities available to them. And this is actually, this is a video from this past year we held at the Flatirons campus here in Boulder, Colorado.
So hopefully this video and sound will work for everybody.
Competitions like this teach you a lot of the things that you miss out in the classroom, interacting with other people, dealing with situations that aren't ideal, dealing with uncertainty.
Most valuable lessons I've learned in competition was definitely resilient, because there were so many problems we were running into, and we had to confront this problem and figure out what we need to do to solve it.
I believe it's one of these events that shapes lives, but still the experiences that you get in this competition will follow you for a lifetime.
All right. So a little bit more about the location of the actual competition. So this is going to be co-located with ICOE 2020. That is the International Conference on Ocean Energy. It's the largest marine renewable energy conference. It's held every 2 years. This year, the National Hydropower Association, NHA, is going to host it in, well, I guess it's this next calendar year, but May 19 through 21, which will take place in Washington, D.C. It's never been hosted in the United States before. It's only been hosted outside of Europe once since its inception. And it's really a great opportunity that brings together the marine energy research industry, the marine energy researchers and industry, and a lot of attendees that the students will have an opportunity to network with and showcase their skills and their concepts that they develop with. So a little bit more about the commitment from the organizers here is that we are going to host this full service competition at ICOE 2020. We will ensure a fair and unbiased competition environment with expert judging. A lot of the details on how we're going to go about doing that are in the rules and requirements document that we've referred to that is available on the website. We will provide $15K of seed funding through a subcontract with NREL to each student team. That is only available for U.S. institutions. But note that non-U.S. institutions are definitely eligible to apply and welcome to apply, but the funding can only go to the U.S. institutions. We will provide marine energy education opportunities. We will have webinars and a series of stories that will be distributed that have references that might be valuable to developing your concept. There will be an alumni group that will be created after the event. I know that they've done this for the wind competition. There will be opportunities to engage with marine energy industry professionals, not only through the development of your business plan, but then also at ICOE 2020. And then, as I've mentioned before, the opportunities to engage with K through 12 STEM educational efforts is an optional perk that you can all take advantage of while you're in the middle of the competition. So then our expectations from the teams is for everyone to compete in a 2020 competition in a professional and collegial atmosphere. Bring your marine energy education into your own classroom. If additional funds are needed, it would be expected that you would perform fundraising to obtain those funds. To spread the message of the competition through outreach and local impact, through your universities or your communities, and that you take advantage of the educational opportunities that we will provide. So the criteria for selection, there's an application template that can be found on our website, but you will be selected based on the following criteria: the educational objective and integration, your organization and project plan, your team configuration and inclusivity, budget management and institutional support, and communication and outreach. And again, these criteria are detailed more in the application template. So the competition schedule as it stands right now is there would be an expected engagement throughout the full academic year, development of contest products and product submission, support student learning on relevant subject matter, local outreach, fundraising, and all team calls would carry on throughout the year. And then there would be a multi-day event at ICOE in Washington, D.C., and within, at that event, there would be a requirement for a team check-in and registration. We'll hold dry run presentations. Those will be optional. There will be a kickoff meeting, then the actual live pitch presentations. In addition, we'll have opportunities for poster and model displays. We're still working on the details of a possible on-site bonus activity. And then an award ceremony with the announcement of the winners. And so here is a timeline of where we stand for deadlines in the competition. So we'll have another informational webinar on October 3rd. The content will probably be, if not identical, very similar to what everyone is seeing right now. On October 18th, applications to participate are due. On November 1st, we will notify the selected team. On November 6th, we will have an informational webinar on design methods that's going to be hosted by OSU. And throughout the school year, November through May, is the expected concept development, where you'll be working and we'll have regular calls with the teams on a monthly basis to check in and have an opportunity for folks to talk about any issues that people are having and trying to form, a good community effort for everybody involved in the competition. On January 31st, we'll request that high-level concept summaries are due, and this is really so that we can identify the appropriate judges for all of the concepts. And then on May 3rd, 2 weeks prior to the event, the full written business plan will be due. On May 18th, the day before ICOE starts, we'll have dry run presentations, which are optional, but it'll be a good opportunity for you to present in front of the NREL staff and own in on your presentation. And then the competition will be May 19th and 20th. And then we'll have a review meeting to assess impact and get feedback, probably in the July timeframe. So I'm gonna pass the mic, I guess, back over to Elise, who's gonna talk about lessons learned from similar collegiate competitions.
Yeah, hi again, this is Elise. There's some of the things that we've learned across the years we've held the collegiate competition are presented in these next two slides, and we wanted to just underscore some of these items because we think it'd be very useful for those developing teams and seeking to participate in this event. What we're finding is that when teams are very cross-disciplinary and there's lots of different disciplines included in the team, that they've proven to be very successful. And in fact, yesterday we held our kickoff meeting for the teams participating in the fiscal year 20 collegiate wind competition, and there was one team that was very proud of the fact that they have 10 disciplines included, and I think they're really excited to get all the different diverse opinions and input, which is really going to potentially really play out very nicely in their final deliverable. What we found over the year also is that having a good internal schedule and plan also leads to successful outcomes. We strongly encourage you to reach out to industry advisors for support. Not only could this potentially give you an edge when you at competition day, but also could be a future employer for your students. And then they can connect you to other industry members as well. So having a nice advisory group, it would benefit your team in many ways. And that's one huge lesson learned we've picked up over the years of the collegiate wind competition. Of course, start early and get everyone involved. The earlier you start, you never know what the barriers you're gonna face, and so just don't delay. But I think that is a lesson for everything. And then the travel part seems to take a lot of time, logistics, and making sure that all that paperwork is in place is very time consuming. So start that as early as possible as well. And taking advantage of the educational webinars and resources offered. We're going to be putting a lot of useful information on the website and sharing information. It's a very communal activity across all the teams, and so it would behoove everyone to share resources amongst all the teams that are participating. And we found that at the Collegiate Wind Competition that it's really evolved into a very collegial and supportive environment across all the teams, and that has really helped benefit everyone and help to achieve that overarching objective of getting people excited about renewable energy and making sure that there's a robust renewable energy workforce. So on that same front, share your challenges and learn from one another. And that we see that a lot at the Collegiate Wind Competition, where they're really relying on other teams to help resolve issues and challenges that they're facing. And this second to last bullet is hugely important. If you don't get selected, what we do at CWC is we really encourage the teams to stay involved. We have a lot of materials. We'll have the rules and requirements document. So we would encourage you to continue to include it in your curriculum and to use this as an opportunity to launch the water power into your curriculum going forward, in hopes that you can be involved in a future year for similar types of competitions. And lastly, bring any siloed teams together as early as possible. Sometimes the teams break off and you have a business plan team and an engineering team, but really there's so much opportunity to mix that together and learn from one another. So we just, like the same messages with cross-disciplinary teams really comes into play here, and you have the opportunity to really learn from one another. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Elise. So next steps, how do you apply for the competition? So as we've mentioned, there is a competition website. The link is provided here. You can download the application template from the website. It's definitely recommended, as Elise just said, to start planning early, pulling together your team, figuring out who you need, and work with your school to figure out how to generate support. You can reach out to us and ask any questions to the email address water.competition@nrel.gov for assistance in forming teams, or any questions that you have, questions that would be applicable to everyone in the group will be posted to the competition's website as well, or the answers, which will be more helpful for you than the questions, but yes. And then submit the completed application to water.competition@nrel.gov by October 18th. And that will be the deadline. And as I mentioned before, then we will notify teams November 1st. And some more information and resources. We have a Slack channel that we are going to use for main communication within the group. So we'll put announcements there. We'll put answers to any questions, updates, all on the Slack channel, and you can join it by going to the link provided on the slide here. And then just, I know we've said this a lot of times already, but the rules and requirements document is what really is going to provide you all the details for what you need for the competition, and will be the main document that will describe exactly what the requirements are. Any questions that are asked that might have an effect on what's written in the rules and requirements. The rules and requirements could be subject to being modified if we find that there was a flaw in it. And so we can provide, update new versions of the rules and requirements document based on the questions that you have or feedback that you have. We will post that the updated version always on the website and notify everybody on the Slack channel if there have been any updates to it. Teams can consist of any combination of undergraduate and graduate students, but some undergraduate participation is going to be required. International institutions, as I mentioned before, are welcome to participate, but they cannot receive funding. And it is not a bullet on here, but I do need to say that across institution teams, multi-institution teams are fully welcome. So you don't have to be a team just from one specific institution. It could be a few different ones. And if you need help facilitating those connections to a different institution, if you only have a few people that are willing to work on it within your institution, we can try to facilitate, forming a different team. We have a list of relevant resources that we've pulled together that could help you understand, the basics of marine energy and the Powering the Blue Economy report that we've mentioned, and other resources that we think could be relevant and helpful to you. That document is available on the MECC website. We can continue to update that document if you have any suggestions on things that you have found helpful in your research. We can add to that list. We've also added a link here to previous reports submitted by collegiate wing competition teams. So if you, we'll distribute the links here, but if you click on these links, you can find the reports that they've submitted. So maybe looking at their business plans and how they've gone about, detailing those plans could be helpful to the formation of yours. And again, it's never too early to start looking for potential team mentors and sponsors. And the link for their website is again provided at the bottom of the slide. So now we can open it up for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please type it into the chat box in your control bar, and we will do our best to answer questions. All right, so we're looking at some of the questions that we have received so far, and there have been a few questions asking us about the links. And so anybody who has registered for the webinar and is on the webinar, we will be sending out the slides and links that have been referred to in all of the slides too. So you will get access to those.
I also have another question here that says, how many people are comprised in a team?
So there's no minimum and no maximum. I think, what is your experience in the collegiate wing?
So collegiate wing competition, there's absolutely no min and no max, like Ariel said. However, there may be limitations on the number of participants that we're able to accommodate at ICOE. So we'll have more information on that at a later date. It's probably going to be a number in the 10 to 15 student range. So it'll be pretty high, but we do encourage you to include as many students as possible during the competition itself, or preparation for the competition.
All right, thank you. Then we have another question here. Do the device concepts have to be original?
I would say that they don't have to be necessarily original device concepts. It can be based on reference models. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
I would say there's no criteria that says it has to be novel. If you want to take an existing company that has published material and assume that their device could be scaled up or scaled down to meet the power needs that you are trying to meet, that seems fine. At that point, you might want to reach out then to that specific developer and ask to make sure that it is okay to use their device in your report, which is what we're trying to promote you to reach out to industry members, and the team here at NREL can help you facilitate finding some contact information for those companies if needed.
Regarding the $15,000 in support, is indirect permitted, or is that intended to be 100% direct cost support with no overhead?
It's really up to the teams on how they want to use the $15K that's offered to each team. It's intended to be seed funding at the Collegiate Win Competition. Often, most of the funds that we provide to the teams is really used for travel for the students to the event. It also includes materials for the device, and that's what we've seen in the past of how the funds have been used.
Okay, great. Then we also had a couple of questions that were related to specific ideas that might be proposed. So we just wanted to address some of these and just let you guys know that if you have some novel ideas, please feel free to pursue those as an option in your proposal. Okay, then we have another question that's related to the team compilation again. Do teams have to consist of undergrad and graduate students? Are there, quote, undergrad-only categories?
Yes, so the only requirement is that some level of undergrad participation is required. Beyond that, there is no other requirement.
Yeah, and to address the question around the categories of competition, no, there's no undergrad-only category. It'll be the same for everyone, no matter how your team is comprised.
All right, are there any device specifications or models to work with to start from?
The reference model projects that were developed by the WPTO is probably the best place to start in terms of size, some structural design, and expected power outputs for most of the deployments in the U.S.
And we have provided on the website a list of references, and the reference model reference is included on there. So there's a link to some information on the reference models available.
Okay, and then does NREL provide testing opportunities for the models that are developed?
Well, these are non-working models that we're requiring, so no. But definitely something we can entertain in future competitions if we have the opportunity to host future events.
Okay, and is there an expectation on how multidisciplinary each team should be composed of?
Expectation?
Yeah, is there an expectation on how many different disciplines are involved?
There is no formal requirement, but if you looked at the, and I'll go back to this slide so everybody can see it, on the application criteria for selection, the organization of the team and the team configuration and inclusivity is a category on here, and so it's something that we do take into account when we're going to be selecting the teams, but there's no specific percentage requirement of how many from which discipline or how many from across disciplines your team has to comprise of.
Should we wait a minute or two more to see if more coming?
And then just to address a couple of other things that have come in, we will be posting this webinar after this is concluded, and we'll also be sending out the slides so that you can click all of these links and everything will be live. We can give you guys another minute. It looks like we are currently out of questions, but just want to give you the opportunity to ask any more. Otherwise, you can definitely reach out to us on the email address that we have provided in these slides here. It's water.competition@nrel.gov.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for participating in the event. We're really looking forward to this competition, and your feedback is very welcome at the email address that we've provided, and just looking forward to engaging with everybody throughout the year. Have a great day.